Let's talk to Ron Paul right now. Hey, how you doing, Congressman?
Doing fine, Joe. Thank you.
What's going on the campaign trail right now for you?
Well, we have to check with the leaders, and they're out there in hinterland, and we have to ask them what they're doing these days.
Well, it looks like they're making a lot of signs in their garages and sticking them up on telephone poles across the country. Yeah, I saw you at the straw poll. You just ignited that crowd out there, and it seems that every time you go on, even like Bill Maher, you have the strangest group of people supporting you. I mean, Bill Maher has a very liberal audience, and yet it seemed that there was a libertarian streak out there, and wherever you go.
Well, you know, to me, that's the most interesting part and the most exciting part. A reporter told me the other day they were in Florida, and they came across a table of somebody that just set it up, and they asked them, well, there were three of them there, and they said, well, what do you represent? And one was a Republican, one was a Democrat, and one was an independent. So I think that's pretty neat because, as you know, I stick to the Constitution, and I think the Constitution brings people together rather than divisive. So to me, it's pretty exciting.
Well, and of course, it's not only that you have a libertarian message on the economic front, but also when it comes to the war in Iraq, you were one of the few Republicans that opposed that war. Are you finding that it's hard to bring mainstream Republicans over to your side because of that?
Less so every day, because they know. Somebody the other day said, well, I was always for it, but we've given them enough time and we're tired of it. So they're coming around. And of course, I approach it not from a left viewpoint. I talk about why don't we only go to war when we declare it and then win it. And so it's a conservative approach, and the old right conservative position was anti-war. I mean, that was the old Robert Taft position. So it's not so strange. Republicans should feel good about taking this position. Actually, George Bush won his first election, you know, with his position, a humble foreign policy, and that's what I'm talking about. So it is popular. It's just been these last several years, the atmosphere that's been stirred up, I think sometimes deliberately after 9/11, that people are supposed to be fearful, willing to give up their freedoms, willing to go to war. And I think they're tired of it because it's bankrupting the country, and I think I've tapped into that sentiment.
Well, shouldn't we be fearful after 9/11 that those attacks could happen again?
Yeah, but I don't think we should be so fearful that we give up our liberties and go to needless war. I mean, we should. The thing that we should have done was gone after Osama bin Laden, and we didn't do it. And then when people realize he used to be our ally, they all of a sudden think, well, there's something wrong with our foreign policy. So I think we shouldn't be so fearful as to being aware of what's happening, and I think a lot of people are starting to realize that our interventions around the world does stir up hatred toward us, and that's just common sense. So I think they're coming around to realizing that.
You talked about a Robert Taft foreign policy, a more isolationist foreign policy, but didn't the attacks of September 11th change the rules of the game?
No, not really. It's sort of like saying, you know, something happens, changes it, you know, our 10 amendments to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, or changes the, truth doesn't change because something happens. No, I think that everything really remains the same, but we should become alert and understand, you know, what motivates suicide terrorism, and then deal with it. But if you ignore that and go off and do the same thing that motivates suicide terrorism, the problem gets worse. There are more Al-Qaeda now than ever before. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Now there are plenty and growing. So the chaos that we created there has actually made our problems much worse.
What do you think motivates suicide terrorists?
Well, Robert Pape wrote a book about this, and it's called Dying to Win, and he analyzes in great detail, more than any other individual. He says it's occupation, and it's not religion. Religion plays a part in it, but it's occupation. And you have to think of it as how would we as Americans react if the Chinese were on our land here telling us to live like they do, and that we had to obey their laws and their religion and impose their will on us. We'd be shooting them too. So it's occupation of foreign powers that motivates people to commit suicide terrorism.
But we weren't occupying Iraq on September 11th, 2001, were we?
No, but Iraq didn't attack us. The Saudis attacked us.
Okay. Well, Osama bin Laden attacked us.
But we were in Saudi Arabia. We had a base on their Holy Land. We had been bombing Iraq, and we had been over there for dozens of years. And a lot of people had died because of our policies there.
Well, we had 10,000 troops in Saudi Arabia, but we've had troops in South Korea for, what, 50, 60 years? We've had troops in Germany. Does that justify the attack of American workers at the Twin Towers?
No, I didn't say it justified it. I just said it explains it. And it doesn't mean that every time you're there that it's going to do it. But when people are upset, other cultures do it too. In Sri Lanka, the same thing happens. It's not a Muslim. It isn't the Muslims that are doing it.